Rolling into a brand new week, IB Nation Sports Talk. Hope everybody has stayed warm out there with this crazy winter weather going through pretty much the entire Midwest, I guess, at this point. Vince was supposed to be here today. He and his son Dylan were down in Florida for a kicking camp over the weekend. They were supposed to fly back yesterday. Flight got canceled, so they're flying back today. So I've got the only Tom Noie here to talk a little Notre Dame basketball tonight. How are you tonight, Tom?
Are we believing that story by D'Addario that the flight got canceled?
It's always something,
Florida.
isn't it?
He's in Florida, and he's going to come back to 35-degree below wind chill. I think he's staying in Florida just conveniently. The flight got canceled.
Exactly. I'd like to see some proof, of exactly where he is. I don't know.
I texted him. It's funny because I texted him on Thursday because my daughter and his son both go to Penn High School, and there were all kinds of closings going on Thursday night. And I said, what are the chances that Penn High School winds up closing on Friday? Because we don't know if there's going to be school. We don't know this. I texted Vince, and he goes, I don't care. I'm en route to Panama City, Florida, or wherever he was. He goes,
it was Panama City.
Yeah. I'm going to kicking camp all weekend. I don't care what the weather's like back there. So, yeah, he conveniently had his flight canceled. Sure.
That's what it is. All right. So Jesse's going to be along later to do some rapid fire. We've got some Notre Dame football talk. And yes, I mean, I don't know if you can see all these comments, Tom. They started to roll in. The Dallas Cowboys talk. Tommy Guns, Mexican word of the day, Dallas, as in yesterday was the last game of the season for the Cowboys. Yes.
The Buffalo Bill or the Pittsburgh Steelers are currently doing their Dallas Cowboys imitation right now.
At least they were expected to lose, though.
Right. Although they did, it looked like the Bills were going to score again before halftime, but it's 21-7 now.
Right.
Just half.
Right.
Look, Dallas Cowboys.
One of those days into the season.
And my first thought while I was watching that was steer clear of Stiers today because he's not going to be happy.
Yeah. And then you got the text from me this morning.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, sure. I'll show up. Okay. So Tom, as we speak, there's actually a men's basketball game tonight. They're at Boston College out in Chestnut Hill tonight. But Micah Shrewsberry, that'll be game number 18. He's 17 games into his Notre Dame tenure now at this point. So how would you describe what you've seen from this first Shrewsberry team so far?
Never a dull moment. Like there are people that have been texting me and saying, I bet you're tired of watching this team. You're tired of watching them lose. You're tired of knowing that they're not going to play well enough to win. But honestly, in my 26th year on the Notre Dame men's basketball beat, there have not been any more fascinating seasons just from a personnel standpoint and from a growth standpoint and a teaching standpoint than this one, because every game you go in, you're thinking, okay, I don't know if they're going to have enough firepower to win this game, but it's fascinating to see how Micah Shrewsberry, like a mad scientist, can kind of try and put all the pieces together in this puzzle to make it look like a competitive basketball game. And I think the one aspect that I'm most impressed with Micah Shrewsberry now 17 games in is he knows they're so undermanned. Like they have no business playing Auburn in Barclays Center. They have no business going to South Carolina or playing at Marquette or really playing Georgetown, even though that was a home game. He knows that. The staff knows that. The players, I think, are starting to understand that. But he's like, look, this is the hand we're dealt. And we're going to go out there and we're going to compete for 40 minutes and see where we are at the end of the game. Sometimes that results in a win, like last week at Georgia Tech when they broke a 13-game ACC win streak. Sometimes it's obvious, like the North Carolina State game, the Duke game, Saturday's game against Florida State, that they're good enough to compete, but they're just not good enough to get over the hump when they need to be.
Yeah, I mean, he had the rant that I guess has become famous. It went viral first, and now like every broadcast that we've seen since then, they've included clips of the rant, after the loss to the Citadel at home. That's been just about a month or so ago now at this point. But he talked about, hey, I'll help you transfer if you're not gonna go out there and play hard and do those things. Play to his standard. I guess my first question is, you had a front row seat to that rant. What, like, in the moment, what were you thinking as you were hearing those things that Micah Shrewsberry was saying?
Even before he said anything, I knew something was coming, because I think it was, I want to say, I know it was J.R. Knesny, but I think maybe it was J.R. and Julian Roper, or whoever the second guy was, Tay Davis, whoever the second guy was sitting at the podium post-game, as they do their post-game at Notre Dame for men's basketball. They're up there sitting there, and Micah Shrewsberry walks into the room and stands against the side of the wall. And you can just tell the look on his face that this thing was going to go nuclear. I mean, you could just tell. He has said from the beginning, even before he coached the game, I freaking hate losing. I can't stand it. Nobody wants to be around me when I lose. I'm a sore loser. And he has even said after a game, I forget what game it was, the North Carolina State game, after the post game there, he ran into Kevin Keats in the hallway, and he apologized for how he acted or reacted after the game, and said, hey, man, I'm sorry I was such a jerk. I just hate to lose. So you knew after the Citadel that he was going to go off on his team, and rightfully so, because it's not the fact that they lost to the Citadel at home or they lost by 20 points. It was just that the fact that they didn't compete. And again, that's the one thing that we talk about with Micah Shrewsberry. It's okay if you lose a game, but it's not okay to go out there and kind of float through the way they floated through that second half and go through the motions. And when the shot's not going, then they're not hustling back on defense, and they're not boxing out, they're not guarding their guys. So like he lit them up in the press conference. But the one thing about Micah, and he's been clear about this, is I may light a guy up in post game in front of the media, but it's not anything that I didn't say to them before I said it to you guys.
Right.
So that's the way he was in the locker room. And it was just something where I think just like the blowout loss to Marquette in early December, where they were down 17-0, and it looked like they weren't going to score a basket, not after the first media timeout, but the second media timeout. Like, they needed to experience that to see what this program can become. Like, can it get to the level of Marquette one of these days, like it was under Mike Bray? So they needed that game, but they also needed the Citadel to say, whatever we're doing, however we feel like we're coming together as a team, it's not working. And we have to be closer. We have to be more connected. We have to care, I think, more about what we are and where we are. It was funny because in the column afterward, I said, this team doesn't need to practice. It doesn't need to watch film. What this Notre Dame men's basketball team, the way it's currently constructed right now, is to go back in the history books, go back in the media guide, and look at guys like Ben Hansborough and Matt Carroll and Torrey Jackson and Luke Herringody, and get a sense of what this program was before they walked in the door last summer and was like, hey, you know, they're all wearing "Hi, my name is" tags because they never really met each other. Like, get an understanding of the pride and the success this program had before they moved forward. And it was funny, 3 days afterward, Micah Shrewsberry said, yeah, we really didn't talk X and O's. We talked about the history of this program and where this program was in the 2000s and 2010s, and guys like Pat Connaughton and Bonzie Colson. So I think they really need to buy in more to what this program was before they got here, so that they could move forward. And somewhere along the line, every coach, every program, as they're building it back up, like Micah Shrewsberry is, they're going to go through a game like the Citadel. So Notre Dame had it. They got through it. They got better because of it. And when there are times where maybe the North Carolina State game or the Duke game or a game that they feel like they won that they let get away, you think Micah Shrewsberry is going to go off again. He really hasn't, because the buy-in and the care and the want to and just the compete level has been raised every game since that 20-point loss to the Citadel.
I thought you were going to bust out a Slim Shady reference there when you went with "Hi, my name is" there for a second, but especially after all the Lions stuff.
Oh, yeah.
In the aftermath of that. But that it does feel like that rant has had some impact, though. Like, it didn't just fall on deaf ears and guys, went and hidden in their corners. I mean, they obviously come out. They beat Virginia 2 games after that. I mean, that's, that Virginia program, regardless of what they are this year, which, was still a team with a pretty good winning record at the, that's a team that even Mike Bray's best teams had a hard time with. And so what do you think ultimately, beating not just beating Virginia, I guess, but the fact that they have competed in every game really since then as well. What do you think that ultimately means for where they are right now and maybe where they could be headed?
That it's another building block. Like, it's not the fact that they beat Virginia. And I mean, Virginia, as we've seen, is not the Virginia that we've come to see the last couple of years, but it was the way they beat Virginia. Like, they crushed them. They kicked their rear ends for 40 minutes up and down the floor. They were up 28 at one point. They had beaten Virginia, I think, 3 times before that by a combined score of 18 points. They led by 18 or more points the final 9 minutes of the second half. So it wasn't the fact that they just won an ACC game. It was the way they won it. Like, they turned the screws on Virginia and just kept turning them. They were making shots. They were defending. So that's like that helped raise the bar of where this program can go, that the players can look at it and say, if we buy into what coach is selling, if we stick together, if we compete and play together and really just care about one another. Like before, like the Citadel game, there were games before that where it looked like it was just 5 guys thrown together off the street that had never played a game together. And I think that's the problem that you get when you have so many new guys. When we talked about in previous years how important, and you and I talked about it in the summertime all the time on the radio, how important the summer program was for this team, because it wasn't about X and O's and defensive slide drills. It was about just putting 10 guys in a gym and going and playing pickup for 2 hours and just getting to know each other. So I think the way they played against Virginia, they can point to that and say, we're struggling now. We're 7-10. We're 2-4. We've got to play this game against Boston College. But if we do the things that we did against Virginia, there's not a team yet in this league that they've proven they can't compete against. Now, to beat them, that's going to take a few more wins and to get this team more confident that they can really have success, not only what's left of this year, but into the future with Micah.
And Micah Shrewsberry's son, Braden, named ACC Rookie of the Week today, hit 7 3-pointers in the 2 games last week. He's been a bit of a lightning rod, it seems like. It's like he seems to get the most criticism. And I'm curious, he obviously has the same last name as the head coach. He is the coach's son. I'm curious, because of all these things that we're talking about, the unique nature of this team and the fact that it was basically thrown together, in late in the summer before, the season, was just before the school year was getting started. Do you think that, if his name is Braden Jones instead of Braden Shrewsberry, is he getting anywhere near the criticism that he gets?
Not a chance, because fans are lazy. Fans are uninformed. Fans just don't know. And yeah, that's not gonna rub a lot of people the right way, but it's not supposed to, because I think they look at the last name and they look at the minutes, and they need, when they lose to Auburn by 20 and they lose to the Citadel and they lose to Marquette, fans are pissed. Like I get it. I understand they're not happy at the product. They're not happy at the program, but that doesn't mean that you can just point to one kid and say he's the reason that they're losing. He doesn't deserve to be on scholarship. He's playing his kid too much. Look, people, if you look at the roster, there's not a lot of choices. Like, if you're going to bench, we
knew that coming into the season,
right? If you're going to bench Braden Shrewsberry, who are you going to play? Alex Wade? Like, and Mike had talked about this the other day when we met with him at Rolf's. Like, he said, Braden Shrewsberry's a 3-point shooter. The fact that he's a 3-point shooter helps with the spacing and the flow and everything they want to do offensively. Because the fan comment next would be, well, he doesn't make a lot of 3-pointers. Just the fact that he's a 3-point shooter, that goes on the scouting report that says, do not leave number 11 alone.
Has to be accounted for. Yes.
Yeah. If you don't leave 11, that allows Marcus Burton to get in the lane and maybe hit his mid-range jumper, and it opens up shots for other people. So it's just not the fact that Braden Shrewsberry is the coach's kid. It's the fact that he's a shooter. He follows his assignment, and Micah Shrewsberry has been upfront and has said, if you don't do your job, you're not going to play. People are going to say, well, what's he doing? Well, then what's he going to do about his kid? Why is he doing it with his kid? Braden Shrewsberry was a starter at the beginning of the season. Braden Shrewsberry is not a starter right now.
Yeah.
He hasn't been since he may start tonight because Tay Davis may not play because of an ankle injury. But the first major move that Micah Shrewsberry made with his rotation was he benched his kid. His kid was playing 33 minutes a game as a starter. As a reserve, he's playing 23. So to say that Micah Shrewsberry plays favorites with Braden, that he doesn't deserve to be on the court, that's just nonsense. Now, maybe later on down the line, if this thing goes the direction everybody believes it's going to go, as far as success, as far as recruiting, as far as talent development, maybe Braden Shrewsberry's better served as a guy who's an 8th or a 9th man on the roster because there's so much talent in front of him. But right now, like Braden Shrewsberry doesn't deserve to play. Where are they in Atlanta if Braden Shrewsberry doesn't drop 25 and make some really big shots against Georgia Tech? They may only have one league win.
And I think that had to be a good sign for this team as well, to be able to go on the road and pull out an overtime game like that, down there at Georgia Tech, don't you?
Yeah, and just the way they played, like it's the flip side of Virginia. Like they crushed Virginia because they just did everything right. Against Georgia Tech, they had like 8-9 different scenarios where they could just look at it and say, I don't think we're going to get this one tonight. We made a good run. We were up. They came back. They hit a big three to send it to overtime. They could have been feeling sorry for themselves. But the one aspect of this program that you really admire, Sean, is their resiliency. Like they're going to get punched in the face. They're going to get smacked around. But the next game, they're going to come back, or the next possession or the next half, they're going to come back and still compete. And they did that in Atlanta. And again, that's another building block. That's something that Micah Shrewsberry and his staff can point to and say, remember when we did this in Atlanta? Like before the Virginia game, there was never anything that Micah or his staff can show Notre Dame on the players on film and say, remember when we did this? Remember when we ran this set? Look at the success that we had. We won this game. Now they finally have some reference points, and that's really key for them to move forward because they can remember back and say, we did it then, let's do it now.
Did you think that they would be getting this much out of Marcus Burton this early?
I was kind of now this is going to sound funny, but I was kind of afraid that this was the direction it was going to go with Marcus Burton because there's nobody else that can do anything close to what Marcus is doing right now. He's the only double-figure scorer on the team. I think he still remains the top-scoring freshman in the ACC. He's the top scorer. He's the top assist guy. He's among the leaders in minutes. He's among the leaders in free throw percentage. I think he's doing way too much, but he has to. Like this is the position that this program is in, for better or for worse. And sometimes I think it's for worse, but there's just no other option. Like when I sat with Micah Shrewsberry in May, I said, don't you have to go out into the transfer portal and find an experienced ball handler and a scorer and a guy that can just go and get you a bucket when you need a bucket? And he agreed. He said, that's our goal. We're still working toward that. Summer school was starting in like 3 weeks. He said, if we don't get him here before summer school, that's good. Just as long as, that's okay. Just as long as we get him here for the start of the fall semester. So they planned on getting an experienced veteran guard to help with the heavy lifting. They couldn't get him for whatever reason. Marcus is doing so much, and he's playing so many minutes, and he's been asked to do so many different things. I wonder how this guy's going to have anything left in his tank in February.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. ND Sailor has a question for you. Tom, can this team get to 500 or close to it in ACC play?
If they can, I'm going. If I say yes that they can, I'm going out and playing the lottery tonight. Because look, it's in my best interest. It's in my company's best interest. It's in our websites and our newspapers' best interest for Notre Dame to have as successful a season as possible. to build the interest, to keep the interest, to have the fan interest. But I just don't see any way this team gets to 10-10 this year. And that's not a knock on the program or Micah or his staff or even the players right now, because they're maxing out right now. They're 2-4, and they're maxing out everything that they have at their disposal in being able to almost beat North Carolina State, almost beat Duke, and almost beat Florida State. But to say this team's going to go, 8-6 the rest of the way, given what's coming down the pike as far as road games, as far as opponents, I would be, if I'm Micah Shrewsberry, now he's not going to be happy because he, like we said, he hates to lose. But if I'm Micah Shrewsberry and I can figure out a way to get to 6-14 in the conference, I would call it a successful year, because that doubles the win total from last year in the ACC when they went 3-17. Yeah. So to go 6-14, I may vote Micah Shrewsberry ACC Coach of the Year at the end of the season.
I mean, is the ceiling, just to be able to continue this level of play, even if they're going to, take some of these hard lump losses, because that is tough. When you especially to me, it's tougher if you plug away and you're losing these, 2 or 3 possession games rather than just going out there and getting your butt kicked on a given night.
Well, I think it's tough. It's tough from a psyche standpoint, especially with 17, 18, 19-year-old kids who need to know that they're good and they need to see the progress. I would much rather have Notre Dame play the games that they're playing right now with Micah in his first year, where they're almost going to beat NC State or almost going to beat Duke or almost beat Florida State, instead of what happened last year down in Louisville under Kenny Payne, where they went 2-18 and there was no chance that they were going to win an ACC game. Like, they were down 30 almost every single game. And I think to be in that position for such a young team that Notre Dame has, that would just be a soul crusher to say, to be like, okay, well, we've got to play North Carolina still. We've got to play Clemson. Well, why are we going to do that when we're just going to be down 25, 30 points? So for them to have a chance, I think, is a real positive. And that's what Mike and his staff have to keep stressing to them. Like, look, we're in every game. If we keep doing what we're doing, it's going to turn eventually for them. And I think it will. And I think that's a lot easier to build what he wants to build than what Kenny Payne's doing and was getting run out of the gym last year by 30.
I read the Q&A, the interview that you had with Mike Bray here, I guess, a couple of weeks ago at this point. Was that, did you do that on the phone? You weren't in the same room with him, right?
I was.
Oh, you were? So
absolutely.
So where did you meet up with Mike Bray? I'm trying to remember, because it's been a couple of weeks. Where did you meet up with him, and kind of give us some insight into how that all went and how it came.
All right. Well, here's how the sausage is made from my end, Sean. We'll go through how
you love talking about the sausage. Let's get the sausage, baby.
Absolutely. So eventually, when the Notre Dame men's basketball schedule came out, I looked, and the first game I looked at was when they were in Atlanta, because Mike Bray is an assistant coach with the Atlanta Hawks. I wanted to make sure, hopefully, they would match up with a home game with the Hawks when Notre Dame played at Georgia Tech. As it turned out, it did. So the original plan was I was going to go down last week to Atlanta, cover the Notre Dame men's basketball game at Georgia Tech at 9:00 on a Tuesday night, and then spend most of Wednesday with Mike Bray as he helped the Hawks prepare during their shoot around with the Philadelphia 76ers, then get a credential and hang out and watch Mike Bray work as a member of the Hawks coaching staff. Long story short, when they're losing the way they lost earlier in league play, I started thinking, you know what, if this keeps going the way it's going, my company's going to say, yeah, let's pass on that trip and save that trip in our back pocket for when they start getting good, maybe go to the ACC tournament. So then I looked again at the Hawks schedule. I saw that they were in Chicago on Christmas night. They flew in Christmas night. They were going to play the Bulls at United Center on December 26th. I texted Mike Bray. I said, if you have any time on Tuesday, I don't know what your schedule's like now. I said, I'd love to just drive in, spend a couple hours with you. Texted me back about an hour later and said, let's meet for lunch at the team hotel on Michigan Avenue about 1:00 on Tuesday. So I got there and I spent a couple hours with him, sat and talked. And the minute he walked into the restaurant, you could tell that he's a totally different guy than what he was toward the end of last season when everything was coming his direction. He's fresher. He's reinvigorated. The game is now the game for him. I think it was too much of a burden for so many reasons while he was up here last year.
Yeah.
And he's like, look, it's January. There are going to be guys that are going to be talking about me coming back to college, taking this job or that job, or maybe being a candidate for this job. I've got no desire to do that right now. I like where I'm at. He's got a 3-year contract with the Hawks. We'll see how that plays out.
I mean, to me, it's perfect for someone, like in his age demographic. He's in his 60s. Just like you said, there's much less pressure, I think, in that position than what he was dealing with, especially last year as a head coach, trying to run a program, face the program and just everything else.
He doesn't even, John, he doesn't even sit on the bench. He's second row Mike. He sits behind the bench. He doesn't have to do media. He doesn't have to do post game stuff. Yeah. He doesn't have to recruit. He just sits there, and Quinn Snyder. Yeah, Quinn Snyder calls him his sage. Like he's the old guy sitting behind the bench, making a really nice paycheck, and offering his thoughts on let's do this or let's do that. Like, and when they were deciding this, Mike Bray told Quinn Snyder, he said, "Look, I've been an assistant coach twice in my life. I was an assistant coach for Mike Krzyzewski, and I was assistant coach for Morgan Wooten, 2 Hall of Fame guys." He's like, "I know how to do this dance.
Right.
Like, I'm not going to be sitting there pulling my hair out, wondering what I'm doing with myself."
Right.
He knows how to be an assistant. He's in a great position. I think he really wanted to take that South Florida job in March, in part because when the season ended and his career basically ended at Notre Dame, he had no idea what the hell he was going to do with himself. And he's like, maybe I'll take the USF job and it'll be great. My grandsons will come up to Tampa. They'll be ball boys at games. And hell, if it doesn't go my way, I'll get fired in 2 years, and I'm okay with that. But then he started thinking, do I really want to take a job and get fired in 2 years, even though I'll still be in Florida? He said, I can't take a job based on those credentials. So that's why he's not a head coach. And he has said, now it may change as we move forward, but he has said he has no desire to ever go back to college, especially somewhere that's not 75 and sunny every single day. And do the dance that he did at Notre Dame for 23 years.
Yeah, I bet. Bray's Beach. That's where he's heading next. Tommy Guns wants to know if this current team is overachieving, underachieving, or just about where you would have expected at this point in the season.
It's easy to say, well, yeah, they're right where we expected them, but we had zero expectations. Like that's what makes this, again, so fascinating. You sit down and cover a Notre Dame men's basketball game, you have no idea. You have no idea what you're going to see on a night-to-night
blank slate basis. Every night.
It's an absolute blank slate. Like, how is this thing going to go? Who's going to make shots? Who's in the rotation? Who's going to give a double? Like J.R. Knesny, is he going to have a double-double tonight? Or is he going to have 5 turnovers like he had the other night against Florida State? You have no idea. So I think they're, in some ways, they're right where they should be. It's so hard to say, or it's right where they should be, or maybe even a little overachieving. It's so hard when they lost 98% of their scoring and 98% of their rebounding and 100% of their starts to say that this team is underachieving, because this team had absolutely nothing going into this season.
Tom Noie, I'm going to let you go. South Bend
I got to go to work. I got to write.
That's right. Go do some basketball. Notre Dame, Boston College tonight. Thanks for making time for us tonight, Tom.
You got it, brother. Take care, Sean.
Okay, you too. See you later. Okay, so that is the one and only Tom Noie covering Notre Dame men's basketball like he has forever and ever. Now, I do have to tell our live listeners, viewers up front, because of scheduling and everything else, Jesse and I had to record rapid fire. So we're going to do rapid fire right now. It is pre-recorded, so you're not going to be able to, necessarily interact the way you would usually interact on any of our topics. But I will sit and moderate, though, nonetheless. Jesse, are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's do this thing.
You had to think about it, huh?
Yeah,
One of those days. One of those days.
it's a
All
long
right.
Monday. I didn't even know
Well,
if I
we've got
wanted to
a
talk sports today.
yeah, I know. Tell me about it. We've got a lot to get to. Yes, we will hit that topic in rapid fire. That'll be coming up in a little bit. But first, fill in the blank. The way Notre Dame has used the transfer portal this offseason is blank.
The way that Notre Dame has used the transfer portal this season is immaculately perfect for the needs that they have been looking for. In terms of, they needed a quarterback, they needed some holes filled on the defense, they needed, some wide receivers after all the transfers. I just felt like everything that was done by Marcus Freeman was very deliberate. Everything was, to fill a need. And I felt like that he went out and got everyone out of the portal that was off of his wish list, right? There was no settling. It was who he wanted, and he secured them. And I think it's just been immaculate so far.
Yeah, I think immaculate's a good word. Mine is amazing because, just what you said, like if you were a pro team and you had to fill holes from a roster standpoint, like if you had to go out in free agency and plug holes, if you were a professional team, I don't think you could do it any better than what Marcus Freeman and his staff have done, by plugging holes and addressing specific needs via the portal. You lose one of the most experienced quarterbacks in college football history, and you go out and you get maybe not the most, one of the most high-profile quarterbacks that were available on the market. A guy who, before Notre Dame's game in late September, people were talking about as a first-round draft pick. They get Riley Leonard. They get a defensive end. They get a trio of wide receivers. Now, one of them, Jaden Harrison, he's a wide receiver. Technically, he's mostly going to be a kickoff return man. But then they also go out and they get a couple of defensive backs in Jordan Clark and Rod Hurd from Arizona State and Northwestern, respectively, and they get a kicker in Mitch Jeter. And, third straight year they have added a kicker. 3 out of the last 4 years they've gone out and got a quarterback. But, like RJ Oben, I don't think you can overlook him at all for the potential impact that he's going to have. But again, they had specific needs. They went out and addressed them. And it really is pretty amazing how they've been able to get, there are some players who are maybe a little bit more question mark than others, depending on what position they're coming into. But for the most part, like these guys, probably 85% of these guys are expected to come into vital roles and be starters and produce next fall. So it really is pretty amazing what they've been able to do with the portal. They really upped it a notch after last year. And I still think that Sam Hartman, with the high profile that he had and how he was able to raise his profile and what he did with NIL, I think that had a big impact on these guys. What do you think?
Yeah, I do think that it did have a big impact. And, I think that a lot of people question the appeal that Notre Dame has in terms of its competitors in the NIL and that sort of landscape. And I feel like Marcus Freeman has made it very well known that Notre Dame can compete with the best of them because they're going out and getting some of these top players at each position in the transfer portal, right? And so if there was a big concern about the NIL potential, I don't think that there should be any. And I think Marcus Freeman also does a good job of how the complete package looks, right? Like you often, if you're coming into Notre Dame, you are probably taking a step up. Like Sam Hartman came here because he wanted to get more exposure and potentially go to the NFL. I think that holds true for a lot of transfers. And then the second part is, you sell them on the education that you can get at Notre Dame as well. And then you combine that with what NIL money that they can give. And so I think Marcus Freeman is a master kind of salesman in the complete package of what Notre Dame is. But I don't think the NIL is ever going to be a limiting factor of why someone doesn't want to come to Notre Dame.
Nope, not at all. Not at all. And that's not something that I think most people were saying a year ago, that NIL was not going to be a limiting factor. I think it was the complete opposite, obviously.
Right.
And again, I think just 1 year and one high-profile quarterback I really think that Sam Hartman has played a big part in that, the impact of that. So besides Riley Leonard, let's leave him out of the equation. Which of the incoming transfers do you most want to see in action?
So to me, it came down to like defensively and offensively. I would say overall, the number one person that I would want to see.
I guess there are special teams there too, but sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so like overall, the number one person I want to see is the Duke defensive end, RJ Oben, because I think that the defensive end / Viper, basically the edge defensive positions are going to be kind of the big question marks at Notre Dame's defense this season. I think the linebackers, the interior linemen, and the secondary will all, figure themselves out. You have a lot of returning pieces. You have a lot of, and you're combining that with some portal pieces here and there. But the edge and Viper, they don't have a dude yet that is guaranteed going to be your dominant pass rusher, a guy who's probably going to lead the team in sacks, pressures, all those important edge rushing stats. And so I think I'm most excited to see him because I think he can be that difference maker on the defensive side. And when you have a good rush, it just makes everything else behind him a lot easier. It makes everyone else's job a lot easier.
Yeah, I definitely can't disagree with him. I think that when you lose Javonte Jean-Baptiste, and they got more out of Javonte Jean-Baptiste, I think, than maybe they could have even expected, or maybe they got what they expected, but more than externally, I think we expected. And now you get RJ Oben and you plug him into that spot, and I think that there's a legitimate expectation that the production is even going to go up a year. And kudos to both Al Washington, the defensive line coach, and Al Golden for what they were able to get out of that defensive line. And when you've got those interior guys coming back, that's going to help as well. I'll go the offensive route, though, and I'm going to cheat a little bit. And I'm just going to say Bo Collins and Chris Mitchell, the two receivers. And maybe you can throw Jaden Harrison in there as well, even though, again, I think his biggest role is going to be as a kickoff returner. But you're bringing in – what did they need? They needed more experience from a wide receiver standpoint, especially considering the departures that they had at that position. They had to improve that room. They did it, one, by saying goodbye to one wide receivers coach, and then two, bringing in another receivers coach in Mike Brown. And now you add these two guys, there is going to be some question, because like they have experience, Collins in the ACC, obviously, and he's kind of got this long love for Notre Dame, it seems like. And then Chris Mitchell, you bring him in, even more production than Bo Collins, but it's at FIU. Again, like, how does that translate going from a group of 5 to a power 5, position? Like with Kane Madden on the offensive line a couple of years ago, and they brought him in from Marshall, that didn't work out that well. Now that's an interior offensive lineman, so like the physicality is different. But for Mitchell, what's it going to look like coming up a step and then pairing him with Riley Leonard, a new quarterback as well, and a new offensive coordinator, and Mike Denbrock? So a lot of questions, but I'm really excited to see those two guys in action and just how they pair up with Riley Leonard and how they compare to some of this young talent that is already on the Notre Dame roster, and just what they're able to do.
Yeah, so offensively, you kind of took my thunder power. Chris Mitchell was going to be my guy, and it was going to be specifically how does 64 receptions, 1,100 yards, and 7 touchdowns translate into Notre Dame's offense? How do you replicate that sort of production at a higher level? But I think that it's easier for skill position guys to make a transition, quite honestly, because it's more about your precision, your route running, your footwork, and everything like that. It hasn't
your hands.
Yeah, your hands. It doesn't really, and we already know he's a fast guy, so I don't think it really comes down to, like you were bringing up that offensive lineman. It's one thing if you're going against 250-pound interior linemen compared to 325-pound interior linemen, and so you can get outmatched physically. But I don't think Chris Mitchell is going to struggle with that because his game is more of the finesse. Your hands, your speed, your cutting, that sort of stuff, and that's mainly more intangibles. Can it be sharpened? Sure. But it's predominantly there. And so it's just a matter of how they mix that in to Riley Leonard's game and how Denbrock wants to utilize him. And I think he's going to be a common guy going in motion a lot, a guy that you move around the field. And if you watched a lot of playoffs or if you've watched a lot of these, offenses, look at Michigan did in the national championship. They almost motioned 2 times before they would snap the ball. So it's a big part of it. And I expect him to fill that role a lot, moving around the field.
College football writer Stuart Mandel from The Athletic says he thinks that even players who are on teams that are in the playoffs are going to opt out before their team is done playing because the championship game isn't until late January. In other words, you're going to start the playoffs because of these different levels of the playoffs now, expanding to 12. You're going to start in mid-December. You're going to run through late January, and he thinks some guys are ultimately going to drop off because of their draft status. Do you buy or sell that?
I sell that actually, because at the college level, guys only want to play when there's a national championship on the line, right? Like that's the whole reason of playing. And I don't think, as long as there is still the opportunity that a team can make the national championship, or they're playing to get to the national championship, I don't buy it at all. I think you're going to see guys playing no matter what. But outside of the top 12, sure, I think it's just going to be exactly what we've seen. But that wasn't the question at hand. The question is, are any of these guys, amongst these 12 teams, going to be opting out because maybe they're a 12 or going against a 1 or whatever it might be? But I just don't buy it. I still think that a lot of these guys want to compete at the college level. It's just when there's nothing to compete for outside of a random bowl game, that's when you're going to see the guys opt out.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if a guy like injures his foot or sprains a knee or whatever, then maybe
he's like 50-50 going into the game, questionable, pre-existing injuries, but a completely
look at
Dylan
Johnson. Yeah, look at Johnson for Washington, the running back. Like not everybody's going to be him, but at the same time, here's a guy who was injured. He ended up declaring for the draft, but he wanted to keep playing because he wanted to help his team win a national championship. And so I completely agree with what you're saying. I mean, you're seeing so many opt-outs because the games I think if anything, it's going to be the complete opposite. It's not going to be guys who are in the playoffs opting out just because there are a few more rounds, and games to be played in the playoffs. It's going to be everybody else who is not one of the 12 teams in the playoffs. That's where more opt-outs are going to come in, because the games obviously don't mean anything. They don't mean nearly as much as the playoff games. So I think if you're in the playoffs, most of those guys are, they want to win a national championship, and it's going to help their ultimate draft stock as well by going up against better competition in the playoffs and sort of proving themselves. They're going to be guys, who are maybe, bubble first, second round type guys. And if they prove themselves against some of that better competition, I think they only stand to raise their stock. So am I going to say that nobody is going to opt out in those cases? No, but I just think it's going to be so minuscule that it's going to be a blip, basically. I don't think you're going to see any of your top end type guys opt out of those situations by any means. All right, Jess, we've come to the point in the show where people who are sick of hearing Dallas Cowboy talk, I guess, can relish in the fact that they lost. They can hear us, drown in our misery and hope that the talk gets, less and less. They're out of the playoffs now. So there's at least for a little while less to talk about, but it is the day after the Cowboys got embarrassed at home by the Green Bay Packers in the wild card round, the first round of the playoffs. So I ask you, Jesse, what should the Cowboys' next move be?
Oh, it's so hard to say. I've tried not to think about this or talk about this, to be honest with you, because I just don't know how much it really matters at the end of the day, because I think a culture around this team has been set by the owner, and to me,
I don't disagree with that.
I just feel like it's a very privileged kind of prima donna, not tough culture. There's nothing earned in Dallas. You get to Dallas and a lot of things are given to you. Yep. And I don't know what replacing a head coach is going to do, but you have to fire the head coach and the defensive coordinator. Really, I think everyone's on the table for firing except about 9 players. And I'll give you those 9 players very quickly. I'll see if you agree with them.
Okay.
I think CeeDee Lamb is on that list. Zach Martin is on that list. Tyler Smith is on that list. Tyron Smith is on that list. And then if you go over defensively, I think Mike is on that list. Deron Bland is on that list. Travion Diggs is on that list. DeMarcus Lawrence is on that. Yeah, DeMarcus Lawrence is on that list. And then my last player, and this is controversial, but I don't think Dak is – I think Dak is on that list. I know he didn't play well.
I would put Brandon Aubrey on the list, though.
There you go. There you go. So a nice round top 10, right?
Yeah.
And so those are my
Dak
10
is
players.
a big question to me. Dak is a big question to me because, to me, I've seen enough of Dak. This is 8 years now, and he just got outplayed by a guy making his first career playoff start. Jordan Love and C.J. Stroud, in their first career playoff starts, each now have half as many playoff wins as Dak Prescott has.
Yeah,
and that's troubling to me because after 8 years, you know what you've got in the guy. The biggest problem with him is he's owed $60 million next year, so you can't. You can't just write that off. There's a huge salary cap hit, even if they tried to get rid of him. Like, there's just nothing you can do with him other than extend him and you hope that you can pay less.
Yeah, and I get what you're saying, but in terms of yesterday, I feel like the split goes 33% Dan Quinn, 33% Mike McCarthy, and 33% Dak. And the reason why I say Mike McCarthy is the whole team played bad. Again, they didn't have the mentality of a tough team, and that falls on your head coach if you don't have the mentality that you're going to come out and play tough. And then defensively, I just don't understand what Dan Quinn did. It feels like he sold out. They were a man team that brought pressure all season long, and now all of a sudden we're going to drop into zone and drop Micah Parsons into coverage on 3rd and longs. That's really your answer. And then they're playing light boxes with underside safeties and 12 personnel. Like, what do you think is going to happen? No adjustments were made the entire game. And it's like, even if Dak had a day, they couldn't stop the Packers defensively. I don't know how much it really, would have mattered at the end of the day. And so that's why you got to get rid of everyone. And here's a stat I saw going back from when Dan Quinn was head coach at Atlanta. He had Mike McDaniels, Matt LaFleur, and Kyle Shanahan on his staff. He is 0-6 against both of those guys when they are head coaches. They're passing around the code book on how to beat Dan Quinn. They all know how to do it. Yeah. They know the holes in his defense. And so it's embarrassing. I don't know if he got caught up in all this head coach talk that he didn't want to, actually sit down and think how to game plan this week. But it was an embarrassment on offense. And then, defensively.
I would say Dak Prescott is the Ian Book of the NFL. Struggle against the good teams, you feast on the bad teams. But really, though, that's the whole organization at this point, because you can throw Dan Quinn in there as well. Like, getting bludgeoned, the game was over when it was 14-0, and I texted you as much. And I wasn't I wasn't just, frustrated.
We've seen
at that
it before.
Point. Because that's the game plan that Green Bay wanted is what they got. Get out to a multi-score lead, and then Dak Prescott starts pressing. Mike McCarthy has no answers for it. Dan Quinn had no answers for it. Like, I think we were both sweating. Like, at some point, we knew Dan Quinn was probably going to move on and become a head coach, and like what he's done with the defense the last few years. It's like, we were really worried about it. But after yesterday, when you fold your tent like that, you get bludgeoned. You're right about the entitlement. The Cowboys are a soft team, and I don't mean that. Soft. Yeah, and I don't mean that everyone across the board is soft. Like, some of the players, that you mentioned are the guys that I want, but they're wasting careers out there. They're wasting Zach Martin's career. Right. They're going to waste Micah Parsons' career. All these others, Tyron Smith, on down the line, they're wasting careers because look what happens, and it doesn't matter who, the head coach is once they get to the playoffs. Look what happens.
They're all soft.
Tent folds. Yeah, they're all soft. And I think you nailed it. We've talked about it before. It starts from the very top on down. The entitlement starts with the owner, and there is not enough internal accountability. But that's why, like, Jim Harbaugh just interviewed with the Chargers today. Personally, I would fire McCarthy, and I would, like everyone's talking about Belichick, Jim Harbaugh would be my first call, because Jim Harbaugh, look at the stops that he has made, completely turned around a program at Stanford that was not a traditional winner, got them winning. Went to San Francisco, an organization that had been down before he got there, gets him to the Super Bowl. And look at what he just did at Michigan. Again, a program, his alma mater that was down, just won a national championship. But it starts with the team building with Jim Harbaugh. But it is not just, there's accountability, but there is also physicality. And they are not just, they're not just soft from a hard hitting standpoint, that they are, but I think that's something that Jim Harbaugh has shown that he would turn as well. But they're physically not there. They are fundamentally not there, and that's what bugs me about Mike McCarthy. They were the highest scoring offense in the NFL. They won 12 games, but they're also the most penalized team in the NFL. Those things don't go together. To win that many games, it just shows again how much they feasted, I think, on some bad teams, and then they, just get stuck. Like they drafted Mozzie Smith in the first round last year, supposed to help their run defense. Did it help? No, it didn't. So I would go after Harbaugh because they need that mentality change. How much he can change things with an owner like Jerry Jones, I don't know, but I would roll the dice on either Belichick or Harbaugh. I keep leaving out his R. I would take either one of them because of the things that I just listed. I think either one of those guys can change that. I guarantee you, at the very minimum, if you have either one of those guys, Belichick, you want to talk about him specifically, they're going to be a much better, fundamentally sound team with him. Right. And he needs an experienced quarterback. You would have that in Dak. I think either one, look at the reputation Harbaugh has in terms of coaching quarterbacks. I think either one of those guys, if you're going to get the most out of Dak Prescott, either one of those guys could do it. So Harbaugh would be my first call. Belichick would be my second. But to me, McCarthy has got to go because you can't win all these regular season games and just completely fold your tent like that in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, Jerry Jones and the team has done their job. They've drafted ample enough amount of players for for the Cowboys to win with, and that's the frustrating part. Like you said, they're just wasting away CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons, these guys as primes. And over 3 years, 12 wins a season is great, but it's all the same outcome. First round departures in the playoffs, right? They won a game last year against the Buccaneers, but then lost. But still, it's still the common denominator of losing. And so all the talent is there. And I actually have to apologize for all the Lions fans out there that I talked a lot of crap about, because I would love if Dan Campbell was the coach of the Cowboys, because you wouldn't see half of this crap that's been going on. They'd be so much tougher. And that's the thing. Mike McCarthy is weak in the trenches.
He's from Texas. He was a Dallas Cowboy.
Right. He's weak in the trenches, and that's where it's most important, right? And that's what you talked about with Harbaugh. How does Harbaugh win? He sets the mentality of, we're going to smash you in the mouth. We're going to be physical. We're going to run that ball. That's something that Mike McCarthy has not been able to establish, and it shows. It showed offensively on the offensive line and defensively on the defensive line. There's just no toughness on this team at all. And so you have to get rid of everyone and reset the culture of, we're going to be a tough team. Nothing in Dallas is given anymore. You have to earn that star. You have to earn the right. And I don't know if you watched the halftime show, but I mean, look at how mad Jimmy Johnson was. He knows as a head coach that that's not what this team should be playing like. And it's just, ever since they got rid of Jimmy Johnson, they have not had anyone in there that has set a culture of, we're going to be tough. And that's really all it comes down to.
Parcells just wasn't there long enough. He started to set it. The culture was changing then, but you went from Parcells, again, it's like you were going to have some pushback against the owner. Jerry Jones wasn't going to completely get his way, but they went from that, Wade Phillips, and, we know how that went, Jason Garrett after that. You're absolutely right. Let's go draft Audric Estime and change our mentality and say, we're going to be a hard-nosed, physical, rabbit at your football team. Oh, by the way, we've got CeeDee Lamb. We can throw it downfield as well. There are things that we can do. And
it just, to me, the last thing I'll say about this game is you could see CD Lamb's body language in those first couple of drives was bad because, one, that's all they wanted to talk about. But two, I think there's more to it. I think that they went through this script during the week, and CD Lamb said, we've been a pass-first team this entire season, and now all of a sudden in this script, we're going to start running the ball on first and second down, get it behind the chains as we're already losing when we know that's not the spot Dak needs to be in at home. And so instead of giving our all-pro quarterback the ability to throw to our all-pro wide receiver, we're going to hand off to the guy that's averaging 60 yards a game and hasn't done anything all season. It's actually mind-blowing. And so when CeeDee Lamb was pissed, it had to be the reason of, why are we going back to this? I thought we said we weren't going to do this after the bye week anymore. And so to me, it was a clear reading of body language of, this offense is supposed to go through me, not Tony Pollard on first and second down. This offense is my offense.
Tony Pollard is not a lead running back, and he's a free agent this offseason, so he's probably, I don't see there's any way you can pay him. He's not a lead back, like he was a good change of pace running back when they had Zeke Elliott. He's not a lead back. He showed that this year. They've got to have someone with with just a different kind of, again, physicality. You've got to have a different body type back there to be able, to lean on. Tony Pollard was not that guy. I like Tony Pollard. He's done a good job.
Great complimentary back.
Yeah, great complimentary guy. To your point about Jimmy Johnson, I wish I would have seen that because I heard people talking about it today. I need to see if I can find it online somewhere. Here's what I did when it was after it became 21-0. I watched a little bit of a Seinfeld episode, and then I kind of cooled down for a little bit. I flipped it back. Second play back. Guess what happened? Pick six, 27-0. I watched Top Gun Maverick for the next 2 hours and never flipped. I picked up my phone and looked at the score every once in a while, thinking, well, if by some miracle I'll come back, it wasn't happening. Because the last time, remember a few years back when they lost to Aaron Rodgers and the Packers at home, they were getting blown out early, and I had a feeling that they were going to come back and make a game of it. And essentially what I thought would happen happened. They would come back and make a game of it, but ultimately the Packers would pull it out in the end. And that was exactly what I didn't have that feeling about yesterday's game at all.
No. And I promise this is the last thing, but it's bad when Michael Irvin and Emmitt Smith are posting videos on Twitter afterwards talking about how embarrassing that loss was. Those are guys that know how to win, and those are guys who are just visually frustrated and are echoing a lot of the same things of the guys in front of them are what paved the way for the Cowboys. The last 2 decades, everything has been like handed to the Cowboys, and they want the result of what's happened before them, but they're not willing to put in the effort and the time and the toughness that it takes. They have that Irvin, that Smith, that Aikman, that Staubach, that Pearson, put all those guys in, right? It's just not the same anymore. And so until that culture gets fixed, nothing's going to change.
Yep. But I get, like yesterday, that's the difference between watching a game as a fan and a media member, because as a fan, I can change the channel. I can go do something else. If I'm if I'm covering Notre Dame, I can't go anywhere. I got to sit there through the good, the bad, and the ugly. So it's a lot different. It was just very, very frustrating. Congratulations, though, to Lions fans, DK and the rest of the Lions fans out there. Congratulations to them. That is pretty cool.
That game.
Yeah, they get to host another game now, which the Cowboys could have been doing if they had won yesterday. Are you pulling? Are the Lions? Are you pulling for them the rest of the playoffs? Do you have a team? Do you care? Because the Browns are kind of your second team since you live there in Cleveland, and they blew their game as well. Are you pulling for anyone the rest of the playoffs now?
Yeah, I'd be rooting for the Lions just because they've had minimal success, and like I said, I'm actually, at the end of the day, I'm jealous of Dan Campbell and what he's been able to establish there, and that's kind of if there's a mold for what I'm longing for at the head coach position, it's Dan Campbell, and so that's the guy I got to root for.
I mean, I remember saying last year toward the end of the season, because they just, they didn't make the playoffs, but it's hard not to like those Dan Campbell Lions, man. I mean, when you look at where they've come from, and to win a freaking home playoff game for the first time in more than 3 decades and hardly ever even being in the playoffs for 3 decades. It's pretty awesome to be where they are. And hats off to Jared Goff as well, because he was the cast-off in that trade, and he got to beat the team, the coach, the guy they traded him for, the whole thing all in one. So that's pretty cool. Do you buy or sell the NFL's decision to move the Bills-Steelers game from Sunday to this Monday afternoon due to the weather over the weekend?
I sell the NFL's decision just because, and I'll try to be quick about this one. The Bills they're going to be rebuilding a new stadium, and that new stadium is not a dome. And so if you are not a dome stadium and geographically where you are, I don't think that there should be any excuses. And I understand that the concern had to do with travel and how fans and the other team were going to get there.
I think it has more to do with that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I get that. But here's the thing. I don't, and maybe something, I'm not thinking about something properly, but if I was a head coach and I knew inclement weather was supposed to be happening, I would get there before the day before. I'd actually get there maybe a day or two early, get settled in, and maybe run an outside practice, because that's where you're going to be playing in. And so that's a whole nother issue. I don't like how these teams get there, and I know it's part of their schedule and routine and all that stuff, but I don't like the idea of getting there just the day before, because stuff like this happens, right? Like the Bills won home field advantage for a reason, and you play in a non-dome stadium for a reason, and so you should be stuck with the consequences of whatever that weather is at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the right move. Again, it's like, okay, they played in cold weather in Kansas City, but there wasn't, an active blizzard going on when that was happening.
Well, I don't know if you saw, but the Chiefs have that really nice underground system that heats up their field as well. And I think that should be something that's a part of every outdoor stadium. If you know that there's potential for snow like this in the wintertime, every stadium should be equipped with that heating system underneath the field.
Yeah, again, I think I do believe him when I say that it had more to do with their travel. I did see, an all-time bad tweet over the weekend, they didn't cancel D-Day because of weather, and then it was corrected at the bottom. D-Day actually was delayed by a day because of the weather. Watch Band of Brothers, my friend. I think it's episode 2. It's either episode 2 or 3. Literally, they had to move back D-Day by a day because there was fog, and heavy, waves and all that kind of stuff going on in the English Channel. They did actually delay D-Day because of the weather. I think it's Day of Days might be the name of that episode of Band of Brothers. But watch that. Get your quick history lesson on that. Fill in the blank. It's blank that NBC says the Chiefs-Dolphins Peacock streaming only game Saturday night had an audience of 23 million.
It's impressive because if you remember to our show on Friday, I was around, I think 25 million might be the number that they hit at. And that is for, 25 million was for a prediction based off of, the game being on NBC or CBS or Fox type network, right? And a channel that everyone gets. But when you're exclusively on Peacock, I think 23 million is impressive when you roll the dice and we're willing to take the risk that people are going to find a way to watch that, or, to get Peacock, right? And so they doubled down on themselves. Everyone called them stupid, but it turned out to be, I'm pretty sure, one of their most profitable days. And so, if you really were doubting it, you shouldn't have watched it, because it only works with the viewers watch on Peacock.
It's the NFL, baby, and it was arguably, the most desirable game of the weekend. Maybe Cowboys-Packers was supposed to be, and they got up over 40 million, I think. Even in a blowout, but you've got the defending Super Bowl champs, one of the biggest stars. You've got the pop star, up in the press box in the suite and the whole thing. It just boggles my mind that people keep, like going at her when all she's literally doing is watching her boyfriend play football. But that's another story. But like Mike Tirico, they made him read the announcement on the air last night during the Lions game, talking about milestone moment in media and sports history and all that. Yeah, it's scary what the number could have been if it had actually been on broadcast TV, though, because I still know plenty of people who were not able to, like there was still people at the last minute who had no idea it was on Peacock, like friends, back in Kansas on Facebook trying to find the channel and all that kind of, they're like, what channel is this on my cable system? Sorry, bub, it's not on your, most likely not on your cable system. So I think they could have probably been up over 35, pushing 40 million if it had been on regular broadcast. But it is a big number. And like I said, I told you the other day, they'd announced the numbers. If they were good, they are. It's the most streamed, like in terms of streaming only, it's better than any Amazon game has done. 15 million plus was the best that any Amazon game had done. They still haven't announced any of the numbers for those Notre Dame Peacock games, but they announced this one because it was a massive, massive number. Speaking of that game, last question. What did you think of Jason Garrett in the booth? I don't know, were you watching and listening or I don't know where exactly.
Yeah, it was interesting because I was like, why is Tirico doing this game with Collinsworth and now he's got to go to Detroit the next day, and why is he doing the game with Garrett and then the next day he's going to Detroit to do the game with Collinsworth? And I was like, man, I guess they're really trying to give Jason Garrett some airtime here, but I don't have anything negative to say. I just think he's there. He's kind of just a guy, right? And I appreciate his consistency. Like, he doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low. But again, he doesn't really add anything in particular to me. And so he's just there.
That's the problem. Like, don't you expect someone who's been a freaking NFL head coach and an NFL quarterback to give you more? But it's literally just like, Mike Tirico calls the play and then, they show the replay and it's, and it's like Reed runs this route, like, oh, he wasn't able to get, like, he literally just repeats what he's seeing. He's not actually giving you any analysis of what's there, like why it happened or didn't happen. He's just literally recapping the play, on the screen. That's my biggest beef with Jason Garrett. Like, he's got to actually give us some analysis. But to me, he's got so much of that I'm a coach and I'm going to give you cliches in him that, he's, as of right now, just either unwilling or unable to let it out. So I hit the mute button twice, the unmute button, and it stuck. So now I've got to say everything that I just said all over again. We didn't want to have to record rapid fire. As regulars of the show know, Monday is Vince's day. Vince traveling back from Florida with his son. Their flight yesterday was canceled. Since Monday is not Jesse's day, he had some things that he had to attend to at a certain time today. So he said, I can record something with you earlier in the day, but I can't do it live, unfortunately. So that's why we had to record. And as I flashed, the comments, I know everyone was not a big fan of that, but we had to do with what we could do today. But appreciate everybody for being here today. Vince will be in tomorrow on Tuesday. So Vince will be in. We'll get the rundown of his travels and his son's kicking camp, and we'll talk some Notre Dame football tomorrow as well. I should have called you, Tommy. If I would have known where you were, I could have called you right up. John, appreciate it. But we got most of our Cowboys venting done. We would have gladly taken the heat, because we know that we talk too much of that silver and blue team for a lot of people's liking. But hey, they lost and it is what it is at this point. I will be curious to see if they go after any big guns, but I won't continue the talking on that topic right there. Appreciate Tom Noie for jumping in, talking some men's basketball with us early in the show. Appreciate Jesse for working around his schedule. And again, Vince will be in tomorrow, and we will be live for the entire show. So be here. Hit the like button, and of course, subscribe, rate, and review, and we'll talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.